I found another man's underwear on our bedroom floor. My fiancée said, "It's probably yours." But the tag still had the store barcode. When I asked who it belonged to, I always thought people exaggerated when they talked about those moments that change everything. In movies, characters freeze, music swells, the camera zooms dramatically. Real life usually moves slower than that. But on the Thursday, everything snapped for me. Things didn't just change. They flipped like somebody grabbed the world by the edges and decided to shake it until bolts came loose. That morning started as a completely normal day. I left the apartment before sunrise because my boss asked me to stop by a supplier on the other side of town. The errand took less time than expected, so I drove back home earlier than planned. I didn't text my fiancée, Riley, because we had lived together long enough that surprising each other wasn't some big deal. Besides, she usually slept in on days she worked late the previous night, so I expected to step quietly into a dim, quiet apartment where she'd still be bundled under the duvet. I parked in my usual spot, walked up the stairs, unlocked the door, and immediately felt that odd heaviness in the air, the kind you can't explain but can't ignore. It wasn't a smell or a sound, just a subtle shift in the atmosphere that makes you stop for half a second. I brushed it off and set my keys on the counter. The living room looked untouched. The kitchen was clean. Everything seemed exactly the way I left it. Nothing was out of place until I stepped into the bedroom doorway. There it was on the floor. A pair of men's underwear. Not mine. Not even close to mine. New, bright-colored. One of those flashy brands I never bought, never wore, never even considered wearing. And the part that really made my brain misfire was the tag still attached. Not a price tag. A full retail sticker with a barcode and size label. I stared at it long enough to forget to blink. The bedroom was quiet, bright enough from the morning sun, and the underwear sat exactly in the middle of the floor like whoever dropped it didn't even try to hide it. My stomach twisted so hard it felt like something crawled inside, and clenched everything with both hands. Before I could move, Riley stepped out of the bathroom, still drying her hair with a towel. The moment her eyes met mine, everything in her face shifted. Not surprise, not the good kind anyway. More like the look someone gets when a hidden trap they set goes off too early. She tried to speak casually, but her voice wobbled at the edges. She asked why I was home so early. I asked why there was underwear on the floor. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse her of anything. I just asked. She looked at the underwear for a split second, then she shrugged like it was no big deal and told me it was probably mine. I stared at her because the explanation was so absurd it felt like she didn't just think I was stupid. She thought I was blind, memoryless, and maybe missing half my brain. I picked up the underwear with 2 fingers and showed her the tag. She insisted again that maybe it belonged to me and I just forgot about it. I asked her when I had ever worn anything like that. She stood quietly, searching for some way out, and the silence felt so heavy it pressed against my ribs. Then something inside me clicked. Something small, but sharp. I checked the tag again more carefully. The store barcode was intact. I had bought nothing like this recently. And Riley rarely bought me clothes without telling me first, because she admitted more than once she didn't know my sizes well enough to guess. I didn't say anything for several seconds. I was waiting. I wanted to give her the chance to tell me the truth in whatever shape she preferred to deliver it. Instead, she doubled down. She told me maybe the laundry machine mixed things up, maybe I threw out the tag, and it somehow reattached itself. Maybe the cleaners at the laundromat made a mistake. She built a tower of excuses so unstable that the slightest breeze could collapse it. And that breeze hit when my phone buzzed. It was a notification from our shared bank app. A purchase from a clothing store across town, timestamped 7:42 a.m. that same morning. I opened it. The item description matched the brand of the underwear almost exactly. I looked at Riley. Her eyes darted away like someone tugged them with a string. She tried to say she bought it as a gift for me, but she didn't know how to explain the size difference. She said she guessed. I told her she'd lived with me for 4 years. Guessing was no longer an option. She kicked into panic, talking fast, tripping over her own reasons, contradicting one sentence with the next. She said she meant to surprise me, but then said she bought the wrong size accidentally, but then added she never took it out of the packaging. Except it was right there on the floor, clearly removed, clearly worn by someone. I asked her again, who did this belong to? She froze. Completely. The kind of stillness that happens when someone realizes there is absolutely no version of the story that can save them. Before she could speak, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message preview appeared across the screen. It wasn't a name I recognized. It wasn't even a name, just an initial and some numbers, like someone she didn't want tied to anything identifiable. But the message itself was enough to make my throat tighten. The message said he was sorry for leaving something behind. He hoped she found it before I got home. He asked whether he should come back to pick it up later, or if she preferred he waited until tomorrow. She lunged for the phone, but she knew I had already read it. She tried to swipe the notification away, but the damage was already done. A flood of excuses rushed out of her mouth, none of them connecting to each other. She talked about misunderstandings, accidents, friends visiting, a cousin staying over, anything she could grasp. The more she talked, the more obvious it became that none of it lined up with reality. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I didn't pitch a tantrum. I simply looked around the room, our room, and felt something detach inside me, like a thread pulling free from a seam, unraveling layer by layer. I asked her one more time, slowly, who the underwear belonged to. She opened her mouth, but before a sound came out, her phone buzzed again. This time the message preview wasn't just incriminating. It shattered the entire facade she was trying to maintain. It was a screenshot of a calendar reminder titled, Westcon 6 a.m., window open. And the message under it said he missed her already. Her knees buckled slightly. Mine didn't. Part 1 ends there, with reality finally stepping into the room and sitting down between us like a third person. The moment that second message appeared on Riley's screen, something strange happened inside me. Not rage, not panic, not even heartbreak. It felt more like cold air flooding a room that had been sealed for too long. My thoughts became painfully clear. I wasn't guessing anymore, wasn't trying to interpret hints, wasn't searching for some gentle explanation. Every piece finally lined up, and the picture they formed was brutal but unmistakable. Riley's shoulders slumped as if someone unplugged her confidence. She started pacing around the room like she expected to find an escape hatch under the rug. I watched her go in circles and realized she was searching for one last believable lie, something thin enough to throw over the truth like a sheet. The problem was that the truth was huge, towering, and refusing to budge. She told me the reminder was just a joke. She insisted she didn't know why someone would send it. She said she had no idea who he was. Every sentence weakened the next. She talked so quickly her words tangled into each other. I didn't move. I didn't respond. Sometimes the quiet is louder than yelling, and she could feel it closing in. When she finally stopped pacing, she leaned against the dresser with her hands shaking slightly. She forced a deep breath that did nothing for her. She said she made a mistake, the kind of mistake that supposedly happens when people are confused or stressed or emotionally overwhelmed. She claimed she didn't want things to go this far, that she didn't want anyone in our home, that she didn't mean for this to hurt me. The irony hit me in the chest. Hurt wasn't something that happened by accident this time. This was built, planned, scheduled. I asked her how long it had been happening. She hesitated, then said it only happened once. She said she regretted it instantly. She said she planned to tell me, but didn't know how. The problem was that the underwear on the floor didn't look like once. The reminder on the phone didn't sound like regret. And the man's message wasn't the kind someone sends after a single encounter. I didn't accuse her. I didn't point out the contradictions. I simply told her I was going outside to cool my head. I stepped out of the apartment, walked into the hallway, leaned on the wall, and tried to gather my thoughts. I didn't want to say anything impulsive. I didn't want to turn into someone I wasn't. If I was going to confront this, I needed to do it with a straight mind. I didn't get more than a minute. As I stood there, the stairwell door opened. A man walked in from the parking lot with the kind of casual confidence of someone who believed he belonged wherever he was going. He carried a gym bag over his shoulder, smelled faintly of cologne I didn't recognize, and had that expression people get when they're expecting someone to greet them warmly behind a door. He looked at me, then glanced at my apartment door, then back at me. Something in his eyes flickered, recognition, maybe, or caution. I asked him who he was looking for. He hesitated, shifted his weight, then said he thought Riley lived here. He asked if she was home. I didn't respond right away because the audacity hit me so hard I needed a second to process it. He didn't seem nervous. He didn't look guilty. He looked confused as to why I was standing between him and what he clearly believed was his next visit. I told him I was her fiancée. The color drained from his face like someone flipped a switch. His mouth opened slightly before he shut it again. The gym bag slipped a little from his shoulder. His entire posture collapsed inward. He asked if I was joking. I told him I wasn't. He stared at me, searching my face for something. Anger, maybe. Rage. Violence. But instead he found stillness, the kind that doesn't announce its next move. He swore under his breath and rubbed his forehead. He said Riley told him she lived alone. She told him she ended her last relationship months ago. She told him she wasn't ready for something serious yet. She told him he could visit whenever he wanted. She told him I was a relative staying temporarily. And the worst part? He believed her. Before I could ask anything else, Riley's voice burst from behind the door. She stormed into the hallway, eyes wide, chest tight, voice cracking as she told him he shouldn't be here. She tried to wave him away like he was a delivery guy who dropped off the wrong package. He didn't budge. He demanded answers. He asked her why she lied. He asked why she let him walk right into this disaster without telling him anything. His voice got louder, but not aggressive, confused, betrayed. He kept saying he wouldn't have gotten involved if he knew she was engaged. He said he had no interest in being pulled into someone else's relationship. Riley began throwing out excuses like someone flinging clothes out of a burning closet. They contradicted each other instantly. She said she told him we were practically broken up. She said she told him I had moved out. She said we were on a break to figure ourselves out. She said she didn't think it mattered because she didn't see a future with him. The man stared at her like he didn't recognize the person in front of him. Neighbors opened their doors. Heads peeked out. People whispered. Someone on the third floor started recording with their phone. That hallway, usually so quiet you could hear someone sneeze 3 floors down, turned into a stage Riley couldn't escape from. The man threw his gym bag on the floor and sank into a defeated posture. He told her she used him. He told her she brought him into someone else's home without his consent. He told her she risked him getting arrested because wandering into an apartment complex like that without clear permission was a fast way to end up in handcuffs. His voice cracked at the end. You could tell he hadn't planned any of this. He was blindsided just like I had been. Riley walked up to me and tried to pull me back inside. She started begging for privacy, saying we could fix things if we discussed them alone. She tried to touch my arm, but I stepped away because the touch felt wrong now, wrong in a way I couldn't even describe. I told her I wasn't stepping inside that apartment until I understood the full extent of what had been happening. She kept telling me not to make things worse, but it wasn't me making things worse. The damage was already done. I was just finally seeing it clearly. The man asked Riley how many times she had lied to him. She didn't answer. He asked her if she had brought anyone else into the apartment. She didn't answer. He asked her if she ever planned to tell him the truth. She looked at the floor because she didn't have one single honest sentence left in her. Then another twist hit. A neighbor who lived 1 floor below came up the stairs holding a package. He looked at the man, then at Riley, then at me. He asked if everything was okay. Before I could respond, he recognized the man and casually mentioned he had seen him several times over the past month coming and going at odd hours, always using the back staircase instead of the main entrance. That landed like a sledgehammer. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It wasn't a moment of confusion. It wasn't an accident. Riley had built an entire hidden routine behind my back. She coordinated timings. She coordinated entrances. She coordinated early mornings and late-night visits. She lived a double life so polished that nobody would have suspected a thing if not for one careless slip. A pair of underwear dropped on the floor. The man picked up his gym bag with a disgusted expression. He told Riley he wanted nothing to do with her anymore. He apologized to me for being part of this mess. And then he walked out of the building shaking his head in disbelief. Riley followed him halfway down the stairs, shouting desperate explanations that did nothing to slow him down. Every sentence she threw at him bounced off him like rubber bullets. He disappeared through the door, and she stood there breathing heavily, staring at the empty doorway as if expecting him to reappear. When she turned back toward me, something in her expression shifted from panic to calculation. She tried to approach me again with her hands out like she wanted to guide me inside and clean up her story piece by piece. But it was too late. I told her I was leaving for now. I didn't yell. I didn't insult her. I didn't call her names. I simply told her the truth, that I needed distance because everything she said felt like poison. She tried to block my way. She tried to insist we could fix it. She tried to promise it was only him. She tried to swear it never happened before. She tried everything. But the moment she reached for me again, something inside me finally broke loose. Not a dramatic fracture. More like the quiet snap of a rope that had been fraying for a long, long time. I stepped past her and walked out of the building. Behind me, her voice followed, thin, trembling, desperate. But ahead of me was something she couldn't follow anymore. Clarity. Real, unshakable clarity. When I stepped out of the building that morning, the cold air hit my face so sharply it felt like the world wanted to make sure I stayed awake for what was coming next. I reached my car, sat inside for a few minutes, and stared at the steering wheel. Not because I was lost or paralyzed, but because I needed to replay every moment with fresh clarity. I didn't want to rewrite anything in my head or soften any edges. I wanted the truth laid out plainly, without the fog of shock or the noise of her excuses. I drove to a quiet spot near a park, parked under a tree, and let the silence stretch. The strange thing about betrayal is that it doesn't hit all at once. It settles in waves. First comes confusion, then disbelief, then a sharp stab of humiliation, then anger, then another wave of humiliation because you realize how long someone has looked you in the eyes while building something behind your back. But after those waves simmered, something steadier emerged, the understanding that the situation wasn't salvageable. Not because of one moment, but because of every moment she tried to manipulate, dodge, twist, and soften the truth. I stayed in that car long enough for the morning sun to shift across the dashboard. Then I made a decision. I wasn't going to disappear quietly. I wasn't going to let her rewrite the story for everyone else. I wasn't going to allow her to turn this into some vague, relationship confusion tale she could tell to protect her image. People deserve to know the facts. And I needed to protect myself from whatever version she was going to fabricate next. The first call I made was to her mother. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for clarity. I told her calmly that Riley had been cheating for at least a month and bringing a man into our apartment. I explained the confrontation in the hallway, the neighbors, the messages, the underwear. I didn't dramatize anything. I said it plainly, and the more I spoke, the heavier the silence on the other end grew. Her mother didn't gasp or cry or yell. She just breathed heavily into the phone like she had expected something like this eventually. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded tired, resigned. She said Riley had a pattern they all hoped she had outgrown. A pattern her previous fiancé discovered the hard way. A pattern the family tried to keep quiet because they didn't want her reputation damaged before the wedding. The words hit harder than I expected. Her mother admitted they kept it from me. Not because they wanted to deceive me, she said, but because they wanted to believe Riley had changed. They convinced themselves she matured, that she learned from the past, that marriage would stabilize her. They ignored warning signs because facing them meant admitting they had been covering for her for years. I hung up the phone and leaned back in the seat. Instead of feeling relieved for the explanation, I felt nauseated. This wasn't a one-time moral slip. This wasn't an insecure moment. This was a habit she had practiced, refined, and disguised so well that nobody noticed until something fell out of her bag and onto the floor of our life together. The next step happened naturally. People around us deserved to know why the engagement had collapsed. Otherwise, Riley would twist the story so aggressively it would land in places I couldn't even trace back. Her friends, her maid of honor, her bridesmaids, everyone who had been told I was the problem. I sent them short messages, not emotional ones, just factual sequences of events. The underwear, the texts, the confrontation in the hallway, the neighbor's comment about the man using the back staircase. The responses came quickly. Some were shocked, some were supportive, but the one that stood out was from her maid of honor. She said Riley had been distant for weeks, constantly checking her phone, stepping outside during dinners, avoiding conversations that got too personal. She said Riley seemed to be planning something. Not a wedding plan. A fallback plan. A secret plan. Another message from one of her closest friends said Riley confided to her that she wasn't sure she wanted to marry me. She was considering alternative options. She had been flirting with someone to test her feelings. The friend assumed it was harmless. She assumed Riley would realize what she was risking. She assumed Riley would stop before crossing the line. Assumptions piled up like sandbags, too weak to hold back what was already flooding through. Hours passed before Riley texted me. She asked where I was. She asked if we could talk. She apologized dramatically, but her apology focused on being caught, not on what she had done. She said we could repair the situation if we approached it correctly. She said we could go to counseling. She said the man didn't matter because she barely even liked him. She said I was the real relationship. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to punish her. Because I didn't trust a single thing she could say anymore. I spent the next few hours dealing with practical steps. I contacted my landlord. I asked about removing her from the lease. I asked about locks. I asked about the process of separating our finances. I wasn't impulsive. I wasn't unhinged. I was methodical, detached, focused. The kind of clarity betrayal sometimes forces on people. I went to work to distract myself. I needed noise. I needed routine. When I arrived, things slipped back into normal rhythm until Riley unexpectedly showed up at the entrance. She never came to my job unannounced. Yet there she was, red-eyed, frantic, hair unbrushed, hands shaking slightly while gripping her phone. Security stopped her immediately. My job didn't allow people to wander inside without clearance. She argued with the guard, saying she needed to speak with me right away. She pushed past him, but not far. He blocked her movement and held up a hand. She shouted my name across the entrance hall, like someone throwing a rope into water, hoping to catch something. My coworkers turned their heads. Eyes widened. Brows lifted. Whispering started instantly. It felt like the hallway scene at the apartment compressed into a different location with new spectators. I stepped forward and stood several meters away from her. Not close enough to engage, not far enough to ignore. She tried to approach me, but the guard stepped between us again. She began talking fast, saying everything could be fixed. She said she could make it right. She said she would cut contact with the man. She said she would delete everything. She said she would block him. She said she would stay with her parents for a while if that helped. She said she would prove she cared. Then her story took a strange turn. She claimed the man had manipulated her. She claimed he pressured her. She claimed he took advantage of her. She tried to frame herself as a victim of some emotional trap rather than someone who orchestrated a double life with precision. I watched her speak and realized she wasn't apologizing. She was negotiating. She was trying to salvage her image in my eyes, even though the foundation was already buried. Security eventually escorted her outside. She kept trying to turn and look back, but they guided her toward the sidewalk. Her voice trailed off until it disappeared. Later that afternoon, something unexpected happened. The man she cheated with messaged me. He apologized again, but this time he mentioned something new. After the apartment scene, the building manager had confronted him because a resident reported an unfamiliar man entering the building repeatedly without authorization. Since he didn't live there, and since his visits were at strange hours, the manager filed a trespassing warning. It wasn't an arrest, just a formal notice. Still, it was humiliating for him, and he blamed Riley. He said she assured him everything was safe. She told him nobody would care. She told him no one would be home. She lied about every detail. He said he didn't expect me to forgive anything, but he wanted me to understand he wasn't trying to be part of the chaos she created. After that message, I made one more decision. I needed to end the engagement formally and completely before she twisted anything into some narrative where she became the victim and I the unreasonable partner. I contacted an attorney. I explained the situation. I asked about my rights regarding the apartment, finances, and shared property. I wasn't spiteful. I was careful. I needed everything documented. I needed everything protected. And once the attorney gave me instructions, I followed every one. By evening, Riley must have realized she had lost control of the story. She had lost the man she cheated with. She had lost the image of a stable fiancé. She had lost her parents' confidence. And she had lost the ability to shape the narrative because too many people already knew the truth. Her final act that night was a long message begging me to come home and talk. She claimed she didn't want to involve anyone else. She said we should keep it private. She pressed on the idea that couples sometimes go through difficult phases. She insisted we still had something to save. But all that remained was a version of her I didn't recognize anymore. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a temporary lapse. It was a collapse she engineered with her own decisions. And the fallout was far from over. I didn't go home that night. I drove around the city until the lights blurred through the windshield and the streets felt empty enough to quiet the noise in my head. Eventually, I ended up crashing on my friend's couch. He didn't ask questions, didn't push for details. He saw the look on my face and knew something irreversible had happened. By the next morning, I had a plan. Not revenge, not punishment, just clarity and boundaries. The two things Riley had steamrolled repeatedly. The attorney I spoke with gave me instructions on how to safely collect my belongings without escalating anything. So I contacted two close friends, told them what happened, and asked them to come with me. Not for protection, but for verification. Witnesses help when someone tries to rewrite events later. We met outside my apartment building midday. The air was warm, the street quiet, and I felt detached, as if I was walking through a documentary about someone else's life. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't upset. I was steady in a way that surprised even me. When I entered the building, the manager approached me almost immediately. He said he heard the shouting yesterday and wanted to check in. He also mentioned that, according to the security footage, a man had entered the building with Riley multiple times over the last month, always using the side entrance. He said he already documented the trespassing incident. Hearing that from an official source removed any last fragment of doubt. My friends followed me upstairs. I unlocked the apartment and stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the smell, a mix of scented candles and something unfamiliar, like cologne that wasn't mine. My bed was stripped, sheets thrown into a corner like someone panicked and tried to clean up in a hurry. Riley wasn't home, which was a blessing. The next thing I noticed was something I didn't expect at all. The man she cheated with had left more than underwear. In the corner near the bed, half hidden under a pile of laundry, sat another item, a small toiletry pouch. Inside were essentials, toothbrush, razor, deodorant. Nothing too personal, but personal enough to confirm this wasn't a single lapse. This was routine. This was a second life within my home. My friends saw it too. One of them exhaled sharply. The other shook his head slowly. It didn't hurt this time. It clarified. Riley hadn't been confused. She had been preparing for a parallel relationship, blending it into the edges of our life, hoping neither man would ever see the whole picture. She didn't slip up because she was reckless. She slipped because she got too comfortable. We packed everything that belonged to me. Clothes, documents, electronics, sentimental boxes, and tools. I kept my hands steady because I didn't want any argument later about what was taken. My friends recorded timestamps as suggested by the attorney. Everything was meticulous. Halfway through packing, the front door swung open. Riley walked in holding grocery bags. She froze. Her eyes flicked from me to my friends to the half-empty closet. Realization rolled over her face in slow motion. She dropped the bags. 2 apples rolled across the floor. She asked what I was doing, but she already knew. I could see it in the way her voice thinned. She told my friends to give us privacy. They didn't move. They weren't leaving. She tried to approach me. I stepped back. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't say anything sharp or dramatic. I told her plainly I was removing myself from the situation because she created a version of reality where I didn't exist unless she needed stability. She insisted everything could be fixed. She called the affair meaningless. She blamed stress, loneliness, self-doubt. She said she felt pressure from the wedding planning. She said she didn't know why she did what she did. She threw out every explanation she could find, hoping one would land. Then she saw the toiletry pouch and stopped talking completely. Her eyes widened. Her mouth parted slightly. She hadn't realized he left it behind. She hadn't processed the full scope of the evidence until that moment. And then something darker surfaced. Her expression shifted sharply, from panic to calculation. She whispered that if I told people everything, it would ruin her career. She said her parents would stop helping her financially. She said her friends would judge her. She said she still had a chance to control the narrative. Then she made a mistake she couldn't take back. She said she would go to the police and claim I scared her if I didn't stay silent. The room fell completely still. Even she realized it the moment those words left her mouth. It wasn't a threat of violence. It was a threat of reputation, her last survival tactic. But the manager already had footage of the man entering the building with her at 6 a.m. on multiple dates. Neighbors had seen him leaving late at night. The hallway confrontation was on half a dozen phones. And the messages on her screen made her timeline impossible to twist without stumbling over her own tracks. I looked her in the eyes and told her the truth. Not to torment her, not to get revenge, but because she needed to hear what happens when you build a world out of lies. Every move she made had consequences. I walked past her, carrying the boxes with my friends behind me. She called my name, but there was no urgency in it anymore. Only the sinking realization that none of her tactics were going to work. Outside, I sent the building manager a written statement verifying the timeline of events. I forwarded screenshots of her messages to my attorney. I sent her parents a final update, including the detail that she threatened to lie to police to protect herself. By evening, everything moved faster than even I expected. The landlord removed her from the lease after reviewing the security footage. Her parents stopped covering her expenses, telling me privately they couldn't defend her any longer. The man she cheated with blocked her everywhere after the trespassing warning reached him formally. The wedding vendors sent invoices for cancellation penalties, all in her name. Her bridesmaids abandoned the group chat completely. Her maid of honor sent me a quiet apology message, saying she had suspected something but didn't know how deep it went. Within 48 hours, Riley was facing the heavy end of her choices with nothing to shield her. I moved into a small apartment across town. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't spacious. But it was mine, and it wasn't tainted by hidden calendars or strangers walking through the hallway while I slept. The strangest part wasn't the relief. It was the calm. For the first time in months, maybe years, my mind wasn't cluttered with the effort of trying to make sense of someone who didn't want to be understood. I didn't block Riley. I didn't lash out. I didn't seek payback. I didn't need to. Reality handled everything better than anger ever could. She ended up exactly where her actions led her, not because I pushed her there, but because she burned every bridge she built while thinking nobody would notice the smoke.